getting into the controversial picks, coming in at number 5 for me is Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. Hi there everyone and welcome to the Definitive Tarantino Ranking. Today me and Josh, or After Credits as you may know him, will be combining our list of favourite Tarantino movies to decide once and for all what is the average ranking for each of Tarantino's films. To keep score, each movie will be given points to reflect where it lands on our rankings. For example, if we both rank a film at number 5, it will get a total of 10 points. So Josh, what are your opinions on Tarantino as a whole?
Well, if you don't know, Tarantino is... I go back and forth to whether he's my favourite or second favourite director. You know, he's constantly tied with Edgar Wright, but he's definitely up there as one of my favourite filmmakers ever. I love his style, I love his personality, and I love a lot of his films.
I'm pretty much with you. He was the first director that I sort of got into where I realised what a director was. I think we've got pretty different lists.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is going to be pretty fun. Do you want to reveal your number 9 pick?
Yes, so my number 9 pick for the worst but not a bad movie, Tarantino film, is Jackie Brown. I think with Jackie Brown there's a lot of great acting, especially from Samuel Jackson, you know, making his second appearance in a Tarantino film, one of many. And it's an interesting story. Obviously, it's adapted from a novel, so it's not an original story. And I think that's where maybe it hinders the normal Tarantino version of storytelling, because he's trying to adapt a novel rather than telling his own story. And I think that's where I don't like this film as much as others, because it doesn't feel as Tarantino as the others. And it's got some interesting scenes, but mostly I'm not that entertained throughout the film. And a lot of the scenes transition to one another, like with these fades to black and then fades back in, and that was a bit annoying after a while. But yeah, it's not an amazing film, but it's alright. It's 6 out of 10. It's pretty good.
I think Jackie Brown's a pretty common pick for like lower towards the list. I get that it's like when you're going through Tarantino's films, Jackie Brown's like one of the least exciting ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll get into my thoughts when I get to it. But my number 9 pick is Death Proof.
Yeah.
Which again is another one that's usually at the lowest, and I think I like it more now than when I first did my ranking video. But even though there are bits in it and I like the whole fact that it's split into 2 parts, that does kind of make it feel really repetitive in a way. And even though like the characters are entertaining, I could probably name you like 2 different names.
Yeah.
Whereas in all of his other films, it's like every single character, even little cameos, like the Wolf in Pulp Fiction is in it for what, like 10-15 minutes? And he's one of my favourite characters. So yeah, overall there are definitely bits in it that I like, but overall it's probably the most forgettable out of all of his films for me.
Well, my number 8 is Death Proof. So yeah, to mimic what you said, it feels a bit like the black sheep of a Tarantino film. I mean, it was part of this double feature of, God, I'm blanking on the name now.
Grindhouse.
Grindhouse, that's it, thank you.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, there's kind of a novelty that I have with the film going into it, thinking, oh, it's supposed to be this low-budget kind of action film. And I think the stunts are really impressive, because Zoe Bell, who's like she's a stunt double for the bride in Kill Bill. She's actually hanging on the car and doing all of that for real, so it's really impressive to see that. And Kurt Russell is a really charismatic person, and you know, he's fun in the lead role. But yeah, as you said, it's split into 2 stories, each one that is like an hour long, so it's a bit weird narratively. And it's a bit more fun than Jackie Brown. That's kind of why I rank it higher. But yeah, it's not one of his best.
I definitely see that. I don't think you can be bored while you're watching it, but I think once you get to the first like car crash scene, that's the peak of the film, and then it's just sort of like doing the same thing all over again. My number 8 is Hateful Eight, and it's got some amazing like parts to it, and I think you like it quite a bit, right?
This is where we start to differ, I guess.
Yeah.
The most, yeah.
I want to rate it higher because I think it does have some of his best scenes in his filmography. And I also do think it's probably Sam Jackson's best performance out of all the Tarantino stuff. He just absolutely outshines everyone in every scene, I think. But it's just way too long. Like, it's his simplest concept. Pretty much just Reservoir Dogs, but double the length. So I think if it was a 2-hour film, it would definitely be up there for me.
Fair enough. I'll get to it when I talk about it. But
I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to say about it.
Yeah. Coming in at number 7 for me is Kill Bill, and I honestly, I'm not like a big fan of kung fu or martial arts films, but I really like how stylized and fun the action is in this. Like, it's over the top completely, you know, blood squirts out, kind of like in that scene in The Holy Grail when it's coming out his arm.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's the kind of fun action film that I really like. Now, Volume 2, or I guess the second part of the movie I should call it, is much slower, a bit more like a Western feel, and I don't like that as much. It's probably not a film that I'd be drawn back to rewatch, and that's why it's slightly lower than maybe others would have it, but I think it's just a really fun and entertaining film.
Yeah, definitely. My number 7, and again, I think we're going to disagree on this one, is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Not too far off, actually. We're not that far off here.
I really like the main 3 performances. I really like how Margot Robbie is such a character without having a lot to say. The ending is kind of like, I'm really split on it. It's kind of like self-parody, but it's also really satisfying because of how long you wait for it. But the first act feels kind of messy, and the second act feels kind of drawn out. And again, I think if you just shaved off like half an hour of it maybe, I think it'd definitely be higher. But I feel like it's my least favourite one to revisit just because it's so slow and so long.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, coming in at number 6 for me is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh, okay. I thought you had this higher.
I can't remember where it was in my original video because my opinions have definitely changed since that. It's a film where I definitely was not expecting what we got. I thought it was like this fun buddy duo film between Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio for the whole thing, and it's probably the most self-indulgent Tarantino film in terms of like how long scenes go on for, how slow everything is, and I guess yeah, exactly. I wasn't expecting that going in, so I was a bit alienated to start with, but I think I got used to it after a while. It's got some really fun scenes, like when Rick Dalton's getting his lines wrong, he's in his trailer, like, you idiot, you keep messing it up. But I think it's a film that I definitely need to rewatch now that I know what it's like. It's just sort of a fun hangout movie with an ending that is definitely very hype-filled, I would say.
My number 6 is Jackie Brown.
Oh, right.
Now, I kind of want to rate it higher because I think it's pretty underrated. It's usually like bottom 2 on a lot of lists. I do have similar problems with it that you do, that it's a lot slower and it doesn't really feel like a Tarantino at points, but I think the first act is pretty close to Tarantino's usual style. Like, you've got the scene with Sam Jackson and Chris Tucker as he takes him into the car. I think that's one of my favourite scenes that Tarantino's ever done, but then past the first act it does really slowed down and it's got quite a anti-climax towards the end. Yeah, not one of his best, but I definitely think it's underrated.
Okay, getting into the controversial picks, coming in at number 5 for me is Pulp Fiction, which you'll see for many people, I can see making the face. It's most people's number 1, or at least top 2 or 3. I want to preface that I still like this film like a lot, you know, 9 out of 10. It's got like the scenes with John Travolta and Uma Thurman and Samuel Jackson are really great. It's the Bruce Willis and Ving Rhames scenes that I kind of get lost in sometimes. I'm kind of like, I understand the whole theme of this film is that it's different stories overlapping or whatever. I don't know, it takes me out of it a bit, but it's absolutely hilarious. It's very 90s, it's very stylized. The dance scene is obviously very iconic. It's just a kind of fun, crazy ride, and I admire the intelligence that goes into the storytelling of it, having all these non-linear stories overlapping. And obviously, Tarantino is very well known for his great dialogue, and there's some of the best of his whole filmography in this film, definitely, and like so many iconic quotes. There's just a lot to where maybe I don't like it as much, and it's a film that I don't think about nearly as much as I think about the other ones. But without a doubt, it's his most iconic film. I can definitely say that, for sure.
Yeah, I think we've all got those opinions on movies.
Like you with Rushmore, you know?
Yes. So I can't really judge you too hard, but it does just kind of hurt to hear it at number 5.
Yeah, I guess it can. Yeah.
My number 5 is Kill Bill. I've also got quite an unpopular opinion with this because I prefer part 2. Only slightly, like if we were including them as 2 films, it'd literally be like 1 point above the other one. There's a few more scenes in part 2 that I prefer. I really like her escaping the grave. I really like Bill. I think he's kind of controversial. Not a lot of people love him.
I wasn't a big fan of Bill, but...
Yeah, I still do really like the first one, like the whole opening fight, the wiggle your big toe thing, obviously the massive fight at the end, but I feel like that whole film is basically just a setup for an action sequence, and I personally just get a little bit more meat out of the second one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Coming in at number 4 for me, well, you already know it's higher than Pulp Fiction anyway, but it's The Hateful Eight, and I think, and this is something I didn't realise until you talked about it. So everyone like says it's really long, and I only realized that I actually did watch it in parts, and maybe splitting it up helped me like digest the film a bit more because it wasn't that I was sat down for 3 hours, but I was very encapsulated by the story, and because it's all contained, it's mostly a one location film, sort of like a play similar with Reservoir Dogs, and I just think I was very like in the story. I felt very intrigued to see what was going to happen and who was the bad one. And then when they have the twist that kind of changes the whole story, like you said with Channing Tatum, I just really love that. And then it just leads to this whole bloody mess where everyone dies, everyone's brains gets blown out, and it's also a very funny film. Sam Jackson is absolutely hilarious in the film, like when he's telling the guy that he was in the cold with someone and the person got very desperate.
Speech.
Yeah, that was it, sorry. I don't know, I think this is definitely his most underrated film, at least in my opinion, because I would see it towards like the lower half of people's list, but I think it has a lot to offer.
It is definitely better watched in parts, because I watched it for the first time all in one, and it's probably like a 5 out of 10 maybe. And then the second time I watched it in like 2 halves, and that was so much easier to digest. My number 4, we've gone for a similar kind of vibe, Reservoir Dogs. As far as first films go, you can't really get a lot better than Reservoir Dogs. Straight away you can see that he's got this talent for dialogue, talent for interesting direction. It's really grounded and realistic, like the stuck in the middle of you scene, going outside to the car and then the music fades out and then coming back in. It's so immersive and feels so real, and same with the violence, and it's really short as well, and I think partly that is why I also like it. It's that it's just straight to the point, Tarantino dialogue, Tarantino violence, Tarantino characters, and it's just a fun time from beginning to end for me.
Yeah, I agree, and actually my number 3 is Reservoir Dogs, so I can talk about it now. For him to be his directorial debut and it to be this good is really amazing, because he just sort of, let's take a heist film, right, but let's not show you the heist, let's show you the aftermath and everything going back, and structurally and everything, it works really well, and it's just a really interesting film. Like from the first scene where they're in the diner, they're like debating the lyrics to a song, has nothing to do with the plot, but it's just so interesting to see all of it unfold. And yeah, the blood, Tim Roth is basically bleeding out for the whole film, and it just shows you straight off the way, like, it's not over-the-top violence like Kill Bill or Django, but it just shows that he's not afraid to have these bloody scenes. It just shows like a peek into Tarantino's brain of like how like crazy this director is. And like as you said, yeah, it's one of his shorter films, and that makes it easy to like digest it, I guess, because it's not overblown Tarantino.
My number 3 is Django Unchained. Now, my number 3 and my number 2 are like constantly flipping, but Django is one of his longer films that I don't feel like is too long. I just feel like from beginning to end I'm constantly invested in Django as a character, and King Schultz as well. We've got Christoph Waltz returning, and he's playing a completely different character, but is still like just as good as he was in Inglourious Basterds. And obviously Samuel L. Jackson playing a completely different character as well and still being amazing. And then the ending is just like one of the most satisfying endings I've ever seen in my life. And it just really gets you to care about this journey, which even though it's slow, it always feels intense. And the dinner scene with Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the most tense things I think you can experience in a film.
Definitely, I'll get to that one, and you know how much I like that film, but my runner-up, second place, is Inglourious Basterds. So this was my introduction to Tarantino, and what an introduction it is, because it's just bloody, it's one of his revisionist history films. I was like, oh, you could kill Hitler like that? Okay, great. That was really fun to see on screen, and I was just encapsulated by the dialogue, like especially that opening scene when they're in the farm in France, and Hans Lander is talking and he's switching languages, and it's just so tense, and you see there's people under the basement, like a camera goes down and reveals it. That's just absolutely horrifying. And also, you think it's just going to be about Brad Pitt and his league of Nazi hunters, but no, there's like all these other stories going on, but I never feel like it loses focus on any of them. And then of course, it has a tie into cinema, because the final act takes place in the cinema with the film reels and everything, and I like when he puts cinema into his films.
Now, funnily enough, my number 2 is also Inglourious Basterds. What I like most about Tarantino, I think, is that he doesn't let himself get put in a box, how he basically just does whatever he wants, whether or not it goes against screenwriting conventions or directing conventions. Like, no other filmmaker would just kill Hitler and be like, yeah, it's just part of the movie. Yeah. And yeah, I just like the whole chapter sequencing that he does a lot. He basically just does whatever he wants, and I think Inglourious Basterds is a really good example of how good a film and a narrative you can get out of that mindset. And yeah, it's like, my top 3, I all want them to be number 1, but yeah, I just kind of have to put them like this, so take it with a pinch of salt, this top 3.
So, my number 1 is Django Unchained. This was a film that made me fall in love with, like, you know how you said Tarantino, when you watch him, you learn what a director was and everything. Mm-hmm. It was similar with me, and the film that did it was Django Unchained. Yes, the ending is a bit drawn out, but it just has so much to love. Like, Leo DiCaprio gives I'd say my second favorite performance from him, Jordan Belfort, number one, of course.
It's great.
There's obviously the scene that everyone talks about where he really cut his hand, it bleeds out. But that whole diner scene is just fantastic, and it was kind of just, you know, like a revenge flick and everything, and it was just fun to see like this badass story. Like, he didn't take it to, there were serious moments, but he had a lot of fun with it. And Jamie Foxx, this is probably his best performance, and there's just so much to love about this film, even though it's about slavery and everything. It's a really fun film, and yeah, for me it comes in at number one. I understand why people say, oh, but Pulp Fiction's number one. Yeah, I understand that, but for me, Django Unchained.
Yeah, I think Django's a great pick for number one. As I say, like, my top three I could pick or choose. It's such a good blending of tones. Like, it's probably one of his more mature films, but it's also one of his funniest at the same time. Like, I think my favourite joke in a Tarantino film is probably the Bye Miss Laura thing.
Yeah,
that was amazing. Great pick. But my number one is Pulp Fiction. Just like everyone else in the world, apart from you.
Yeah, apart from me.
Yeah. What can you say about Pulp Fiction that hasn't already been said? It's like one of, if you're new to film, it's like the perfect film to get you engrossed in it as a, I know this sounds like really preachy, but like an art form, basically.
Yeah.
It just engrosses you so much. It's not deep or anything necessarily, but it's like experiencing a dream, basically. It just takes you from one thing to the other so perfectly and so smoothly. And I see what you're saying, and what a lot of people say about the Bruce Willis thing being a lot less interesting than the first and third chapter, but I still think throughout it there's so many scenes and so many great lines that are basically like iconic parts of film history. And yeah, I can't help but default that to number one because of its impacts and just how memorable it is, basically. Okay, so we've got our definitive ranking. At number 9 with 17 points is Death Proof. How do you feel about that? I'd say that's pretty fair enough.
That's fair. If it's in the bottom two, yeah, that works, yeah.
Coming in at number 8 with 15 points is Jackie Brown.
Yeah, those two. Either order.
At number 7, we've got Once Upon a Time with 13 points.
Yeah, I think actually my original ranking, it was 7th for me, so there you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's 7 in mine, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, okay.
We've got a tie with 5 and 6, both with 12 points, is Kill Bill and Hateful Eight. I didn't think that they'd be lumped in together.
Yeah.
But then I heard Hateful Eight so high in yours.
Yeah.
Okay. And then next we've got Reservoir Dogs with 7 points. Again, that's number 4, which it was in mine, so I mean, I'm pretty happy with this list so far.
Yeah, it's not far off, yeah.
Yeah. Number 3 with 6 points is Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the top 3. I can definitely deal with that because all of my top 3 are still here.
For me, I know it's like a really good movie, so I expected it to be top 3 at least.
Nice. And then tied for first place with 4 points, Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained.
Right.
I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, my top 2 obviously, and your second and third, so yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's going to break a lot of ground. I think a lot of people like both Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good. Death Proof being last place, that's pretty common. I think, for me, just because I think it is so underrated, kind of hurts me to see Jackie Brown second to last.
So, yeah. Right.
But I know that's like the popular opinion, so I can deal with that. And then after that, pretty much,
I think everything is in a standard
pretty good place. Right, thanks for coming on today, Josh.
No, thank you for having me. I always love to talk Tarantino, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And where can people find you?
So my YouTube channel, After Credits, and then I have various other social medias, but the main one is YouTube. That's where I actually post things. So hopefully there's a link in the description. If you'd like to subscribe, go and check it out. I have an original Tarantino ranking from a while ago. It's a bit dated now, opinions-wise, but I have my special intro and outro if you want to see me parody a couple of the films. So there you go.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below on your Tarantino rankings and whether or not you agree with our definitive list. And I'll see you soon.